Good afternoon. This is historic Route 66, where it makes its way through northern Arizona. Back before the interstate was finished in the 1970s, this road from Chicago to Los Angeles represented freedom for millions of Americans. And in an odd way, it actually fits in with today's anime that I'm going to talk about.
Freedom.
Freedom is a set of 6 sci-fi OVAs from 2007. By the 23rd century, the Earth has been wiped out by a series of disasters. The last of the human race now lives in a dome on the far side of the moon, a thriving colony of 3 million people called Eden. It's a pleasant, disciplined society, steady, controlled, happy. Takaru is one of Eden's rebellious teens. He's rash and impulsive and often quite silly. He also likes racing bikes a lot. Kazuma is Takaru's pal, a fellow racer, and the practical organizer of their attempt to build a custom racing bike. Biz is their partner and an awesome mechanic. He could MacGyver a bike together from 2 cup of noodles and some chopsticks. While Takaru is working outside the dome on the lunar surface, he sees a small meteorite land nearby. The impact leaves a small but surprising collection of items behind, including some photos. He becomes obsessed with the girl in the photo. But the boys' defiant pranks take a new turn when they meet Al, an aging malcontent living in a small sub-colony on the fringe of Eden's rules. Al identifies the photo background from old Earth, the Kennedy Launch Center in Florida. The handwritten message on the back of the photo makes Takaru determined to get a look at Earth, and Al has just the old lunar buggy to send him off sightseeing. And once Takaru sees that the Earth is blue, not rust-colored, like Eden's government says, he's not only learned a forbidden secret and become a fugitive from society, he wants to get to Earth and meet the girl in the photo. This reestablishes one of the oldest known reasons for interplanetary travel, as established in that classic sci-fi film, Mars Needs Women. I'm going to spoil a few plot items.
You didn't. His father.
Al happens to know just the way Takaru can reach Earth aboard one of the old emergency evacuation pods. So Takaru is off to Earth, accidentally taking along the surprised and unhappy Biz. It's lucky that 200-year-old rocket worked perfectly. The first 3 OVAs managed to set up a bit of a mystery about the truth of life on Earth. By the 4th OVA, the series flies off the rails. Takaru and Biz land someplace along the old Route 66. The Earth is a mess, but they hitch a ride with this traveling freak show. It turns out you can find someone on the whole planet with just her photograph. So Takaru heads to Florida to meet his dream girl, Ao, living in a small settlement around the old Kennedy Launch Center. She's delighted to learn that the messages in a bottle she's been shooting at the moon for years have found the lunar colony alive and well. So, now Takaru wants to go back to the moon and get his old friend Kazuya, another great reason for interplanetary travel. Freedom lifts off as if it wants to be a serious sci-fi mystery adventure and then collapses under a pile of silliness and ultimately strains credulity past the breaking point. At the end, it tries to return to seriousness to generate a dramatic and inspiring climax, which is to say, it falls apart. Freedom is directed by Shuhei Morita, with a story by co-writers Katsuhiko Chiba, whose work on Outlaw Star and Gundam Wing apparently make him the sci-fi expert, and Dai Sato, whose work on Eureka 7 apparently makes him an expert on women. The publicity makes a big deal that the character designs are by Katsuhiro Otomo, but that seems to be the famous author and director's only contribution to this project. Freedom is computer animated, uses cell shading to simulate a hand-drawn look. The CGI characters work out okay. They only look a bit unnatural a few times when they're in contact with one another. The mechanical and setting designs are mostly detailed in an attempt at realism with well-worn technology in a shopping mall-style moon colony. The lone exception are the tubes the kids use for racing. Who the heck made these things on the moon anyway? Yoshihiro Ike's soundtrack works pretty well supporting the early going. We have racing music, mystery music, and big plot revelation music. The later music is okay too. I almost feel sorry for the orchestra at the end trying to flog this mess of a story into a heroic crescendo. Freedom's plot fails on several points. It springs from serious to wacky and then wants us to take it seriously again at the end. It wants us to believe in Takaru as the troublemaker who becomes the big hero. But he's established as a character so fickle he fixates on one girl after another. How can he have the perseverance to actually achieve anything? Takaru just is incredible as the hero. He doesn't have a dream beyond a motorcycle race. He has no interest in Earth or its people, except the one girl he saw in a photo. Then he's not interested in bringing Eden's technology back to Earth's needy survivors. He's focused on small, self-gratifying goals. So when he achieves anything at all, it's not from heroic effort, it's by accident. If Takaru's spaceship passed a sparkling ball of tinfoil between the Earth and the Moon, he'd probably get distracted and follow it to Venus instead. Look, I remember the night I sat in front of a black and white TV set watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. I also remember Yuri Gagarin's flight and watching the old Mercury and Gemini launches too. I like the way this anime admires the Apollo program's heady days of manned space exploration. That only raised my expectations, but Freedom doesn't give us a space hero, it gives us a lovesick clown.
We're doing just fine!
Who are you?
Almost every sci-fi story asks us to suspend our disbelief on some points and ignore a few scientific liberties for the sake of a good story. If Freedom had held together a little better, or been a good story, or just made fewer leaps over reality, I'd probably have ignored its many inconsistencies. But Freedom's characters and stories failed to distract me from Freedom's many problems. And if the artwork hadn't tried so hard to make it look like realistic space technology, I might not have expected so much in the first place. So, how does a subsistence-level society of a few hundred people manage to send a rocket up to the moon every year? It took the U.S. Air Force Ranger program 6 years and 5 tries before it hit the moon back in 1965. So how the heck do a few hundred people in a trailer park build a Saturn V to go back to the moon? Why is walking in lunar gravity shown properly when people are outside in spacesuits as being light, but everything reverts to Earth gravity when they're inside the dome? For that matter, after being born and raised on the moon, why aren't Takaru and Biz practically crushed by 6 times the lunar gravity when they land on Earth? If Freedom had kept me a little more interested in Takaru and his story, my mind might not have wandered quite so easily to all these questions. I give Freedom 2.5 stars. Its launch seemed very promising, and it flew for about the first half, but ultimately it just crashed and burned in disappointment. Bandai's 2009 DVD release has several extras from the original Japanese release, 2 conversations with the director, story planner, and staff, a promotional visit to Anime Expo 2007, a 2-part history of the Apollo moon landing program from Goddard to Armstrong, and a short prologue anime about how Takaru and Biz first met. For those of you who think I've discussed Freedom before, you're right. Bandai released the first OVA in the US over 2 years ago on HD DVD, another great choice for them, by the way. And they changed their distribution, and I wasn't interested enough in buying the remaining ridiculously overpriced HD DVDs. Late last year, they planned a complete release, and I pre-ordered it. Then they canceled the complete correction in favor of a 2 DVD release, only slightly overpriced, but I did eventually buy them. Have I mentioned before that Bandai is the stupidest and most aggravating publisher on the planet? By the way, Freedom was partly sponsored by an instant ramen company, so you can count on a product placement in each OVA. If that's what it takes to make an OVA these days, I don't mind. I just wish it was a good OVA. You know, I think this would go really well with a big glass of Tang. Thanks for watching.